Dear friend, welcome back to our devotional series on Moses, the servant of God. Today's chapter is titled To Egypt, a Turning Point in Moses' Life, a return to the place he once fled but now as a man utterly changed. Let's take this journey together. The fire had faded, the bush was quiet, the voice of God no longer thundered, and there stood Moses blinking under the desert sun, surrounded once more by his sheep, the same mountains rising silently in the distance. It must have felt like waking from a dream. But it wasn't a dream. It was the defining moment of his life. Everything in his past had prepared him for this. And everything ahead would flow from this one calling. Slowly, deliberately, Moses gathered his flock and began to move. From the backside of the desert, where silence and solitude had healed his soul, he turned toward Midian, toward home, toward people, toward decision. He returned to his father-in-law Jethro. According to tribal custom, he had to ask permission before leaving on such a journey. And so, Moses simply said, "Let me go, I pray you, and return to my brethren in Egypt, to see whether they are still alive." That's all. No mention of the burning bush, no description of the voice of God, no drama, only quiet resolve. And there is something beautiful about that. When we've truly encountered God, we don't always need to explain it. Sometimes, the most sacred moments are the ones we share the least. Moses didn't parade his calling, he just prepared to obey, and Jethro, with wisdom and grace, replied, "Go in peace." Still Moses hesitated. This was not the impulsive prince who once acted too soon. This was a changed man. 40 years in the wilderness had done their work. The fire of youth had been refined into the slow, steady glow of wisdom. He wasn't rushing forward, he was walking carefully now. Perhaps he feared returning to the very place he had failed. Perhaps he was reluctant to leave the quiet life he had built. Or maybe he just wasn't sure he had what it took. And so, the Lord spoke again. "Go, return into Egypt, for all the men who sought your life are dead." Just as God had once called Abraham a second time, so now, he gave Moses the gentle nudge he needed. And so, the journey began. Not in grandeur, not with fanfare, but with a quiet caravan moving slowly across the sands. Zipporah, Moses' wife, sat on a donkey, perhaps holding their newborn close. Moses walked beside them, staff in hand. But this was no ordinary staff. This was the rod of God. Once a simple shepherd's crook, now it was sacred, set apart for miracles. In Moses' hands, it would part seas and strike rocks. It would become a symbol of God's power flowing through human weakness. And as they traveled, God spoke again. He gave Moses a glimpse of what lay ahead. The resistance of Pharaoh, the terrible plagues, the sorrow of the firstborn. And this teaches us something important. God doesn't always show us everything at once. He reveals the next step and waits to see if we'll take it. Only when we walk in the light, we've already been given, does he give more. Perhaps that's why you haven't heard God's voice in a while. Could it be Hez waiting for you to obey the last thing? He said. If so, go back, pick up the thread, take the next step, and the light will shine again. Then came an unexpected crisis. At a roadside inn, Moses suddenly fell deathly ill. God had just called him. He was on the journey. Everything was in motion. And now he was dying, but in that moment of agony, Moses saw something he had overlooked. He had neglected a command. He had failed to circumcise his son. The very sign of the covenant God had made with his people. Perhaps he avoided it to keep peace at home. Perhaps Zipporah objected. But Moses bore the responsibility. God could not send a man to lead his covenant people, while that very covenant was neglected in his own household. Friend, this is serious. Sometimes the greatest block to our calling is not in our big sins but in the small compromises. One act of disobedience, left unchecked, can halt the work of God. What is God asking you to set right? What unfinished obedience is still waiting? For Moses, it was a small child and one sacred act. But once it was done, Scripture says simply God let him go. Zipporah's reaction showed how deep the tension had been. And Moses realized it was better to send his family back for now. He remembered God's promise. "You will serve me on this mountain." And he trusted that in time, he would see them again. And he did. Later, we read Jethro came with his daughter and Moses' sons to the mountain of God. God keeps his word. Now Moses walked alone, but he was not truly alone. He carried God's commission. He was accompanied by a divine presence. and God was preparing a reunion. His brother, Aaron, was already on his way. They had not seen each other in 40 years, but God had planned this meeting down to the very mile. And where did they meet? At the mountain of God, the place of calling, the place of holy fire. When they saw each other, they embraced, they wept, they talked long into the night. And Moses told Aaron everything. Friend, when God calls you to something big, He will never leave you alone. You may have to walk through fire. You may have to let go of comfort. You may be misunderstood or even separated from those you love. But God will send you an Aaron, someone to walk beside you, someone to lift up your arms when you grow tired, someone who understands the calling and stands with you in it, and you will meet them at the Mount of God. Thank you for joining us today for Chapter 6 to Egypt. May you walk forward in obedience, step by step, even if the road feels uncertain, and may God meet you there with fresh light, a renewed calling, and the companionship you need to go the distance. Subscribe to our channel. We're walking daily through the spiritual journey of Moses and beyond. We'll see you in Chapter 7.